Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 3rd meeting of the Richmond Selectboard, the first regularly scheduled meeting for the month of February. Before we begin, would anybody care to make a public comment? Hearing none, moving on. Josh, board, any additions, deletions, or modifications to tonight's agenda? Moving on. Moving into our warrant agenda, just a reminder of the public meeting scheduled for Monday, February 10th at 7 p.m. for the Cochran Road Corridor and Scoping Study, exploring traffic calming and bicycle and pedestrian usage on Cochran Road. Again, that's Monday, February 10th, 7 p.m., and that's in this room?
Yes.
Okay.
Via Zoom.
Also, a reminder of town meeting on Tuesday, March 4th, a month from tomorrow. And an informational meetings there will be informational meetings on Saturday, February 8th at 10 a.m. and Monday, February 24th at 7 p.m. Those are both at the.
Those are both here.
Both here and
Here.
yes. Yep.
Okay.
And we'll be talking about all Australian ballot items, including the budget, which,
Okay.
as a reminder to everybody, is on Australian ballot this year.
Okay. Are we ready to talk about the audit? And who do we have here for the audit?
So we
I'm Heather Hunter. I'm from RHR Smith. I'm the audit director. And we also
Okay.
have Samantha Ruggles here as well, who was the audit manager.
Hi there.
How are you?
Oh, okay. There's Samantha. Well, riding a roller coaster of February weather.
Good, and I appreciate you passing out the document, the published financial report ahead of time. So I will be kind of referencing certain pages throughout my presentation tonight. And feel free, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them. I'd like to start out by recognizing that on page 5, we issued the opinion. We were hired to perform the audit and to render the opinion on the town's financial statements as of June 30th, 2024. I'm pleased to say that that was an unmodified opinion, sometimes referred to as a clean opinion, which is the highest opinion available. Congratulations to both you and your team for achieving this goal. In conjunction with the audit, we also issue what's known as a SAS 114 letter. And that outlines a variety of things. It includes discussions about management estimates.
General Mills iconography, Chef Wendell is the creator.
Sorry about that.
You always wonder.
Go ahead. That person's been muted.
Okay. And it also talks about if there were any difficulties or disagreements with management, and I'm happy to say there were none of those as well. So now I'll jump right into the financial statements, and I personally like, it starts on page 5, which I see is being shown as well, is what's known as the management discussion and analysis. That's kind of the Cliff Note version of the entire financial report. It gives you a great synopsis of what's happened in this past fiscal year, not only on an entity-wide schedule, but also on the governmental entities and the proprietary funds and so forth. So that's probably a good summary to read going through there in addition to this presentation tonight. And now I'll jump to the page 14, which is your statement of net position. Wait till it kind of populates the screen there. There we go. That is taking the whole municipality together and puts it in what's known as a full accrual basis, which means we, at this point, start recognizing all debt, all capital assets, all depreciation. Everything is included in here. It's kind of the worst case scenario. You hear this being equated to allowing us to compare it to private sector accounting. So you have two types of funds here. You have your governmental activities, and that's where your general fund will fall, and your business type activities, which are your proprietary funds. That's your water and sewer funds. So when you look at your statement of net position, it's kind of the balance sheet for the municipality at that point in time. And as I mentioned, it reflects the capital assets that you see, it reflects all debt, and it's broken down as such. So when you look at the total assets and resources for the governmental funds, you had 291,975 for the governmental funds, and 9,824,336 for the business type funds. So your total municipal entity right now has about $24.1 million in total assets and resources. So you see that it's the liability section, but it's the offset of that. So it will work. The piece that you'll want to focus on is the net position. That's kind of the net worth of the municipality, if you will. It's another way of thinking of that from a home standpoint. It's all of your assets minus any of your liabilities. So it's what you have for the net worth of the organization. Right now, you have $12,344,869 for the governmental activities, and you have about $6.8 million in the business type activities. The key numbers in there, it's great to have that much as a total net position, but you want to focus in on that unrestricted portion. That's what's available. That's that exactly that next line up. That's what's available to help with day-to-day operations and available to carry forward to offset future taxes, to do, appropriate and so forth. Restricted has strings attached, just like the label would indicate, and net investment in capital assets, that's not spendable. You would have to sell your assets in order to reap the benefits of cash from that. So really the only kind of pseudo cash equivalent is that unrestricted portion. The next financial statement is your statement of activities. And again, that's looking at if you turn to page 16, that's looking at, again, the whole entity, taking into consideration that full accrual basis. So this statement is designed to show kind of how much each department kind of gains on its own, and then what needs to be covered through general revenues like taxes. And you will see most of the largest revenue source for both of these would be charges for service for both the governmental and the utility funds. We also have operating grants. Usually those come in the form of your highway money. And then you will occasionally have some special revenue grants as well that you will see down below. But overall, your municipal government is not self-sustaining until you raise taxes. So you will see that 11,621,000. That's kind of the net effect after the direct programming. And if you scoot down to the next page, you will see where the general property tax comes in to balance that. And again, the net taxes enable you to balance your municipal departments. In this particular case, for this year, you had an increase in your net position of $79,000. The business funds, the water and sewer, had an overall deficit of $213,000. So that drew down their net position for this particular fiscal year. And when we get to talking about the proprietary funds in a few minutes, I will outline that in a little bit more detail. So that's kind of your entity-wide. Now let's jump to page 18, which was your governmental funds. This is what everybody's probably more used to seeing. This is the accounting of old for municipal governments, if you will. You have 4 major funds and then a blended group of all your other smaller funds. And I'll focus on both the general fund and the highway fund. In this particular case, general fund assets shrank by about $153,000. The bulk of that is result into a reduction of due from other funds. So some other funds paid general fund back in this particular case. You had a growth in other receivables of about $338,000, and you had a net decrease in cash and investments of about $749. On the liability side of the house, you had a decrease of $81,923. Again, it's that interfund transaction payable, where one fund is paying another fund for work or goods and services are performed, or vice versa. They may be reimbursing themselves from that. So that's where those interfunds come from. On the highway fund, you had a decrease of $81,000 in assets from the interfund transactions. And then you had an increase in liabilities in the accounts payable for highway that grew about $280,000. And again, those are for goods and services provided at year end where you haven't actually paid for them yet. I'm sorry?
Am I on the right page? Because I'm.
We're on
The number
page,
you're citing does not.
Number on, yeah, the numbers you're setting, I'm not finding on page 18. Am I on the right page?
I am talking about changes between the fiscal years.
so we don't see those
We don't
numbers.
see those numbers.
Right. I'm just
Okay.
showing how that fluctuates. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I was looking to try to like highlight things, but okay,
Yeah.
carry on.
That's okay.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one who was lost.
So, looking at fund balance, which is the section down below there, that is again, your net worth for general fund. And so here, I'll give you some numbers you can tie to. Your general fund grew by just shy of $300,000 to that $1,243,000. So that's a number that you can tie to. So you have about a $300,000 increase there. The unassigned portion, which is the line up above that allows you the flexibility, that grew by $253,000 to that 1.176 million. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to decide if you want to carry forward that amount to reduce taxes. That gives you about 15.33% of your annual expenditure coverage, which is just shy of 2 months. So it is a healthy fund balance at this point. So congratulations for that. The highway fund. I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yeah.
We were just commenting that, yeah, but that was back in June, and July 1st, things changed.
Meaning
Yes.
that on July 10th, we had $2 million worth of damage from flooding. So that number has been significantly reduced.
Yes, I'm sure it has. And FEMA is not exactly timely about their reimbursements by any stretch of the imagination. So the highway fund balance, even though it's all restricted, that decreased by almost about 50%, about $362,000 to that $345,000. The statement of revenue expenditures, which falls on page 20. That's your profit and loss for the year. So you have general fund revenues totaling $10,400,000 $35,147. That increased by about $1.46 million or 16.2%. Taxes make up the lion's share of that increase at $1.39 million, followed by your investments in earnings, given the very favorable interest rate environment. Conversely, looking at your expenditures, they total $9.92 million. That's an increase of 1.21 million. And the largest share of that increase is in your educational cost. So that rose by about $795,000 or a 65.7% increase.
Maybe we should just note that that educational cost is really a pass-through.
Right.
Yes.
So that's the education tax that's set not by the town, but we do collect that revenue and then pay it back to the state. So we don't have any control over that. Just want to note that, as we often do.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate that notation. The highway fund had total expenditures of $1,953,000. That actually was a decrease of about $395,000. And the fund balance was used to cover the current year cost. So you had a deficit of $362,000 there. Now we'll jump to the proprietary funds, and they fall on page 22 and 23. So again, your proprietary funds are your water and sewer. They're the ones that kind of look and smell just like private sector business. They have full accrual accounting. And in your water fund, you have total assets of $5,723,538. Sewer is $4,871,306. Your net position, which that would be the net worth of those two funds. So if you scroll down to the next page. You'll see the net position similar to what we saw on the front statement. So the net position for the water department is $2,524,686. It had a surplus of $27,000. Sewer had a net position of $4,251,370. It had a deficit this year of $240,000. And again, you have that same unrestricted line there. So that is the line that you can use to cover operating costs, use for contingency, and so forth. So water's unrestricted of $156,000 covers about 50% of your operating expenses. Sewer, on the other hand, has an unrestricted balance of $311,681. That only has about a 29% coverage of operating expenses, but still a decent contingency if the need were to arise. And if we go on to the income statement or the statement of assets on this one for the next page. Thank you. You see that your operating revenues for both water and sewer total $1,186,665, and you have the same for expenses. Right now, sewer is not self-supporting, so it's not covering its operating costs. You see the net operating income or loss for sewer is $263,086. I don't know if that's something that happened this year or if something that you will need to evaluate in the future as you move forward in those budgets.
Jay, I think all of us are going to what now?
So I don't have the water and sewer in front of me, but I mean, we went through a pretty thorough budgeting process in the spring of last year, knowing that we had some expenses. I remember trying to think what we used some of those in the current budget, and I think that we had some expenses that came out of water and out of the unrestricted funds as well. I just don't have that in front of me to speak to it, but I think that I don't think these are surprising. Like, I think we can go back and tie it all back out.
So this is due to like 20-year study costs and so forth.
Probably some of those things. And we had a chart that we used in budgeting for 2025 that we looked at quite a bit in a number of water and sewer meetings in March, April, and May of last year.
I'll also note there were a bunch of repairs in the specific
That's-
to
Yes.
wastewater treatment, which is like 50 grand, 100 grand, 50 grand.
Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd also point for the record, that technically water sewer is not subject to the select board, but to the Water Sewer Commission. So I think we shouldn't get too caught up in that conversation here, but I think we should put this audit on a future Water Sewer Commission
Yes, we should.
discussion, because it's ostensibly or technically their responsibility to look at net position and budget and expenses.
Yeah, and I'm sure, especially as soon as we get into budgeting, which will probably happen in
Soon.
a month. Like really in early March, we'll start to talk about water sewer budget, so we'll start to use this as a heavy reference for that in guidance.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, Heather, thank you. You can keep going.
Okay. I will kind of jump down to the debt footnote, which is probably halfway through the footnotes, and just kind of highlight at that point. Let me see if I can grab it's like halfway down.
Everyone look good.
Okay, whoa, back. There we go. One more.
It starts on page 42.
Thank you. See, there we go. So I just want to take a quick pause here. This is kind of your roll forward of debt. So we take last year's balance, any additions, any disposals, and gives you the ending for this year. And I am happy to say, or at least, it should be happy that you are paying off your debt. You're not incurring new debt. So that's both the situation for both general fund as well as your business type entities. So you will see the reduction in those payments. And looks like general fund has about 3 more years to pay off, and then they'll have their full debt paid off at that point. So that's a good thing.
Jay?
So I have a question. I know the difference between debt and debt. We have basically borrowed from ourselves from some reserve funds, and that's also money we have to pay back. We've committed to that. Is that reflected here in this audit?
So I'll jump in. It's not, because this audit
Last
ended on
fiscal year.
June
You're
30th,
right. This is okay.
2024.
So no, we're in,
So that
okay.
won't, yeah.
but that would be a next year's audit.
Yeah, and we'll have to figure out how that'll be a challenge for the auditors, how we present that. 'Cause it's
Yes,
the first
okay.
time we've done that.
Okay.
But good question, but yeah, nothing after June 30th.
Okay, Heather, go ahead.
And then I'll scroll down to your budget. That I believe should be right after the footnotes. Keep going. I'm not sure who's driving this.
Page
I'm
58, Josh.
trying
Thank
to
you.
follow.
58.
What? 58?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's doing really good, and I didn't note the last 2 page numbers. I apologize for that.
Yeah, that's all right. We're getting through it together.
There we go. General fund. So this year you had approved through appropriation to bring forward $944,196. So that's kind of what you were used to pay down this year's taxes. If you look down through there, I am happy to say that you had a surplus on your revenue collections of $236,626. So some people like to say over collected on your revenue. You exceeded your revenue projections by that amount of money. On the expenditure side, if you scroll down just a little bit more, you will see the opposite, where you did not spend as much. So you had an expenditure surplus of $62,643. Clearly, the savings in your police department help offset some of the other deficits in those other departments. But the good news is you had an overall surplus of just under $300,000. You did not need to tap that $944,000. So you now have $1.2 million to carry forward in the future, if you wanted to appropriate things. And at that, I know you mentioned that you are heading into your budget process. That gives you some budgetary flexibility as you navigate your budget deliberations in the future.
This all ties back up to those surplus and restricted funds in highway department as far as spendable money. And I'll refer back again, you said about 1.2 million. I think that's about right. But we did have $2 million in flooding. So we just completed our budgetary process. It's going to the voters here on town meeting day. And we did not have $940,000 to put towards the budget this year, quite a bit less, due to the flooding. But that balance did help us get through the flood expenses without having to take an external loan.
But when she said we're about to head into our budget process, that's our water and sewer budget we're
Oh,
just about
right,
headed
yeah.
into.
Yeah, so we all run through
Yeah.
different budget cycles, water, sewer, we
Right.
don't do spring, yeah.
And if you scroll down just a little bit more, you will see the highway impact of that, because I believe somebody just mentioned highway. So you will see the same scenario with your highway fund. You were planning on using $708,712. You did have a surplus for your revenues, and then you did overexpend your expenditure side of the house. So you did have to draw on some of that $708,000, which leaves you a net of about $345,000, which is what you saw in that highway fund balance.
Right, and I think that $708,000 is not money that we budgeted to put towards a tax offset. That was the fund balance at the beginning of the fiscal year. It just so happened that we ended up putting about $940,000 as the actual money back into the budget for tax offset. But I think these are the unassigned fund numbers at the beginning of the year, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So it's different than the money that we put towards the budget, if that distinction can be made.
If you scroll down on that page a little bit, Josh, you'll see, sorry, on the highway.
On the highway.
Yeah.
Okay,
There we go.
highway.
At the bottom, there's $500,000 that of that 708, I believe $500,000 in the highway was used against taxes.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you for that. And I had the 900 number in my head. That's the FY25 number. 500,000 is what we used, I think, in FY24,
Yep.
right? So if we go back up. Right.
I don't think you guys voted to use anything of your general fund. I think you were just gonna take whatever out of that unassigned, that 944, if it was overexpended.
Right. But this 500 is exactly what we used to reduce what we had to raise in taxes.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. That's helpful.
So one thing I will point, kind of leaving the financial statements at this point, is talk a little bit about the management letter comments. Those are comments that we propose to help improve or operational procedures within the municipality. You know, some of them are considered to be best practices. We had 2 of those comments this year. One deals with outstanding checks that are greater than 6 months old and talks about various ways that you can replenish those or reimburse them, reissue those checks. So you don't have those stale dated checks on your bank reconciliations. That tends to follow most state statutes out there on dealing with those. You might also hear the term estate checks. That falls in that same category. The second comment deals with capital assets, and as the capital assets, my understanding, and Sam, feel free to jump in at any point in time, that as the database was being compiled, some of the asset valuations were not accurate, and therefore it just needs to have that kind of review process. We talked about one way maybe to do that is batching those capital assets as your entering them into your database or your system. So you know that the amounts that you have entered reflect the amounts of the invoice, that there are no typos or anything like that when you're doing large data entry of this magnitude. So those are the two comments that we did have for this audit period. And at this point, I would be happy to answer any questions. And again, Sam's here as well, so she can jump in.
Thank you, Heather. Josh, board, any questions?
My only comment, David, is how do we want to take up the two recommendations? And maybe it's not tonight, but.
Okay, we'll put that on the to-do list. Lisa, did you have a comment?
No, I was just, I'm still absorbing a lot of stuff here. Who's our local, I mean, the auditors are gonna be on somewhere else. Who's our local contact for questions if we have them?
That would be myself or Connie, and then we can get in touch with the auditors. They're in Maine, but
Yeah.
they're extremely accessible via phone or Zoom or email.
Connie, any comments, questions, thoughts?
The outstanding checks have basically already been addressed. They are 99.9% a result of fire department employees not cashing their checks. And people who are getting property tax insurance refunds because they overpaid. I don't know if they think it's a scam or what, but we also follow the, every year I have to have several attempts at contacting these people. And if I get nowhere, then it has to go to unclaimed property division in the state. So that's usually more addressed towards the end of the year. But at this point, all the ones that were on the books when the auditors arrived, they've all either been reissued or cashed.
Thank you, Connie.
And I will just step in real quick. So, I mean, just from my perspective of working with Connie, their recommendations we can't tell you what to do. That's what I always tell people. We can't tell you what to do. They're just recommendations. But I will say that Connie runs a tight ship. She was a pleasure to work with. So you guys should be very happy with your finance department. So just from my perspective and my one-on-ones with Connie, you guys should be very thrilled with her work. So
Thank you, Samantha.
Second then.
And one thing with the capital assets was, after Sam and I had looked at it, we actually had to have NEMRIC completely rebuild that software because there was a glitch. I don't know if it was the programming or what, but it wasn't depreciating properly.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on the audit? Heather, Samantha, thank you.
Thank you.
Doesn't sound like we have any questions or comments tonight, but if we do, we know where to find you.
Okay, feel free to reach out and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
I'd like to just make a motion to thank Connie.
Yes. Thank you, Connie.
Yes.
Thanks for making us look good.
All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So Connie, don't go anywhere. Moving on. Next on our agenda is review of second quarter fiscal year 25 financials.
So maybe I'll take it as a start here. So in the packet, there's the standard financial reports that we provide every quarter to the select board and to the public. I'll just go through a couple of sort of key takeaways, and if there's any specific questions, we can try to go through those as well. So in the general fund, which is all of the departments except for highway, police salaries are below budget, contract services are over. This factors in the cost of November, December contract invoices that have not yet been received. And we're still under budget for the department, even with those still needing to come in. ARPA funds, you'll note that money was transferred into the general fund in August and then transferred out to the Special Project Reserve Fund in November. I think we transferred in about just under $1 million in August, and then about $750,000 went back out of the general fund into the Special Project Reserve Fund. Fire department is over budget in regard to salaries. I know they've been talking how busy they've been lately with additional calls and backup for Bolton. All the 2024 flood expenses are posted in Fund 42, so that's the special fund that we're keeping track of those separately. So they're not part of the budget at this time, but we've been tracking them separately so we can get better accounting of those and easier reimbursement from FEMA as far as keeping track of things. You'll notice at the bottom, the budget shows us at being at 76.6% of expenses, and you'd expect halfway through the year to be at about 50%. But that's due to a few lines being paid in full, especially the reserve contribution line, such as $220,000 to the fire capital reserve. That's already been transferred over in full. And then the $795,000 that was transferred out of the fund, the general fund, into the Special Project Reserve Fund. That, unfortunately, in these reports shows up as sort of raw expenses and unbudgeted at that. So if you take those out of there, we're much closer to the 50%, which is about where we should be halfway through the year. In Fund 11, which is the highway fund, highway overtime is mostly related to the 2024 flood and then some winter plowing as well. It's been a pretty busy winter, as we've seen out with the weather this evening as well. The illuminated crosswalk was initially budgeted in 24, but we didn't get it until 25. So you'll see that one is sort of budgeted expenses for 25. And again, all the flood expenses aren't part of the highway budget. We've got those separated out. Overall, Fund 11 is pretty on budget, and talking with Pete, his use of material for the winter is about where he expects it to be. So he thinks he's going to be pretty good with those budget numbers this year, to the point where even in the budgetary process for 26, realizes that we're probably going to have some savings in those accounts.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions? Okay, we're ready to move on. Hang on, Michael, you're up next. So next we have announcement of the placement of the Eagle Scout project, the flag deposit box at the town center, and also a consideration of donating excess project funds. So Michael, if you're ready, go ahead and give us an update.
Hey, so about, oh gosh, a little over 2 weeks ago, I dropped the box off. People who were there in person probably saw it on their way in. They're in kind of the entrance room. And there's only a couple of things I have left to do with it. Yeah, there.
So for reference, that's right outside of the planning and zoning office, right between planning and zoning and the police department. So people who were with us tonight didn't actually get to walk by that because they kind of go straight up the stairs. But if you come into the main foyer in front of the town clerk, you'll see it there on the right, and with the red, white, and blue striping, you can't miss it.
You want me to go get it?
Bring it upstairs. It's bulky.
We have an elevator.
Yeah, we had to use a dolly, so you can
As I
try.
say, it took Mike and his dad a dolly to get it out of the truck. So we'll keep it where it is.
Decrease the likelihood of somebody running off with it.
I think so. Mike, I'll let you finish. Sorry, I just wanted to give a better idea of the location.
Yep. Thanks. So it does, as you can see, it is thus far unmarked. The plaque order is taking just a little bit longer than I bargained for. It can take quite a while. So as soon as it comes in, Josh, you'll have an email from me, and I'll probably be there the next day to put it on, if possible.
Right.
The only item other than that is that there was a little bit of excess funding for my project, totaling like $63.
$65.74.
Yep. Awesome. So the extensive rules for Eagle projects state that the excess funding is supposed to go to the beneficiary. So effectively, that's your money. So what some beneficiaries typically do is either you can kind of just tuck that into your pocket for any expenses related to the project that might come up later if it needs more bags eventually, which is possible. I put 50 in there, so it shouldn't happen anytime soon. But, or if something breaks and needs to be replaced on it or something like that. Sometimes beneficiaries will just donate those extra funds to a nonprofit of their choice. Or yeah, the other thing is the way that I was going to market with instructions and such is just with paper. But if you like, with that extra funds, instead of giving it to you, I could come up with a more elaborate way to market with instructions, because the plaque is not going to be very large, unfortunately. So I could, it's 5 by 7. Yeah, so I could come up with some form of bigger, prettier signage for it if you want. That might be slightly challenging with the size of the space it's in, but it's totally up to the select board, your choice.
So Michael, did you want us to table this tonight and wait for you to come back with a quote for what that would be? Or did the board want to take other action?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, then totally, I can come back to the next meeting with a detailed plan for that.
I can't speak for this, but I see no point hurrying. We can wait.
And I saw, Michael, I saw something flash in the chat about doing a QR code possibly too.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Just a second, that is a great idea. Let me open that up. Yeah, I can totally do that. So yeah, I can come back to the next meeting with a detailed plan on putting a nicer sign on it with the extra funds with maybe a QR code to detailed instructions.
Okay, so that would be Monday, February 17th,
The 18th,
18th.
because of the holiday.
Awesome. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, if you reach out to me next week and just remind me, and if you have anything you want to put in the packet in advance, let me know. Otherwise, I'll have you on the agenda and we can talk in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you all for your time.
Oh, we have a question.
Sure thing.
I'm just,
Up, introduce yourself.
yes,
None of us have the slightest.
clerk, and I was there when the box was delivered. Did a
Yeah.
fantastic job. And would it be all right for me to put on the front porch forum that's here now?
Please. Yeah, that would be awesome.
And I don't have Michael's last name.
Dennis. With one F.
Denis.
Correct.
And the scout troop,
Troop 692.
And will you be available for autographs on any particular day?
Reach out, I guess.
Anything else on the Eagle Scout project? Well, Michael, I want to thank you for taking the initiative to do this, and we're pretty impressed with the results. There are some decisions we have to make at this table that aren't fun, and there are some things we have to talk about at this table that aren't fun. And I'm happy to say that this is something we're all too happy to engage. So thank you, and thank you on behalf of the town of Richmond.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks and a day.
Yeah. All right. See you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next we have consideration of making an appointment to the Planning Commission. Bryton with us tonight?
Yes.
I'm with you. Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah, what would be most useful for me to share with y'all?
Well, first of all, Bryton, thank you for volunteering to fill this vacant seat. We have reviewed your application. Why don't you just take this time to introduce yourself and I guess make a brief statement and make yourself available to any questions if the board has them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pleasure to virtually meet you. Bryton Moeller. I moved here last year. I live on Johnny Burke Road. I am, I'm interested in doing this work because I'm in the process of putting down, kind of starting to put down roots in Vermont. And I think serving in local governance is a good way to do that and get started meeting parts of the community I wouldn't otherwise meet. I have some background in kind of engagement of different kinds of community in collaborative problem solving, and I'm excited about being part of the town planning process and helping pull in different voices. I'm also a master's student at the University of Vermont, studying food systems and doing research that specifically pertains to kind of processes by which groups of people make land use decisions. So my research is quite tied into the work that the Planning Commission does. And yeah, I'm just, I'm early in my career, so I'm kind of cognizant that I have a lot to learn in the space, but I have some time and I have some relevant background, and I'm excited to serve the community however I can.
Well, first, welcome to Richmond. I'm your neighbor over on Kenyon Road. I'm on the east side of the road, so I could throw a stick and probably hit your backyard. So welcome.
Thank you.
You do that often?
I do, yeah.
Oh, that's where all the sticks are coming from.
You have to clean up the litter and the vegetation.
You got to rake the forest.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Lisa, go ahead.
Right, where have you lived before? What's your experience elsewhere?
I lived in Norwich, Vermont, and Sharon, Vermont. So I've been in kind of between Vermont and New Hampshire for about 7 years, and I grew up in California.
You have good taste in towns. Bard, go ahead.
So this is just sort of a standard question, Bryton, so you'll be able to attend the planning commission meetings. You're available for those and the prep time required to participate.
Yes.
Any further questions?
I'd just like to thank him for Brian, for putting your name forward. Bryton, I mean, sorry.
Right,
No.
you talked to Virginia Clerk, I assume,
Yes.
and she's told you about the town plan update that's coming and so forth. And it's kind of a good time for you to enter the planning commission process, because that's a different kind of work than the ordinary planning activities. So thank you.
Glad to be here.
Are we ready for a motion?
David, this is Bard. I'd like to move to appoint Bryton Moeller. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Bryton?
Moeller, just like the tooth.
Moeller to the vacant seat on the planning commission, which has a term ending in 2028.
Thank you, Bard. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Lisa?
Thank you, Lisa. Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote. This is a motion to appoint Bryton Moeller to the vacant seat on the planning commission, which has a term ending in 2028. Motion made by Bard, seconded by Lisa. Please state your name and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Bard, aye.
Jay,
David, aye. Congratulations, you're on the board.
Welcome aboard.
come by and we'll teach you
Thanks,
this
Doc.
handshake.
And thank you for contributing back to our wonderful community.
Thanks for volunteering.
Okay, moving on. Next, we have an update on the resignation of the Lake Iroquois Recreation District Representative. Jack, I assume that's why you're here.
I just wanted to, not that many people keep track of this, but the Lake Iroquois Recreation District is called a municipal district. St. George, Williston, Richmond, and Heinsberg. There's a representative for everyone. We meet once a month, and responsibilities are basically the beach and the 150 acres of recreation trails on the other side of the road. We take care of the road from the Heinsberg Road down to the end of the beach area where the things is. It's our only source of income other than a couple thousand from each town is the summer beach things. And Richmond had, I think they had about 135, 150 passes sold in Richmond this year.
That's not trips, that's passes.
That's passes, yeah, that's passes. And the trips themselves, we have no way of keeping track of. We're going to in the future. So it gets used a lot. The only time we collect money is when the beach is open between, and it's not open every day. When it rains is, we don't open it. But people still use it. As an example, last Sunday, there was 3 groups swimming in the lake.
Last Sunday,
Last Sunday,
so the lake wasn't frozen.
oh, it was frozen. They
Oh.
chop a hole in it.
Oh, good for
There's
them.
a bunch of women that go over there just about every day.
Every day.
Yeah, chop a hole in the water. And there's a lot of things going on the lake right now. There's a lot of cars going around and fishermen and things like that. But LIRD is just responsible for that land that was taken care of. Last year was a big year for the beach. Part of it was we coming off COVID. And the other part was Kim Conant was the one in charge of the kids and taking care of it. He's got a rakes it, keeps the beach real clean and does a good job on it. He won't be able to do it this year. So that's what we're looking for, is somebody on the LIRD. We will be looking for someone else to take the paying job. I would think there would be a number of families that participate in it that would be willing to sign up. I would suppose I'd put something on Front Porch Forum asking for somebody. I don't know whether that's a good idea or not.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. Wanted to get your guys' opinion. Also,
Can't hurt.
I think that's a good idea. Wanted to get the board's opinion. We'll also have, I think, reappointment of all of our committees and volunteers. The terms usually start June 1st. But so I mean, if we get somebody before that, you might want to consider like appointing them for the next 2 years as well.
Yeah.
I'll just point out Jack's resignation is effective February 15th. When, do you know when the next meeting of the LIRD, if I can use that term now?
First Monday of March. We just had a meeting today.
So we have from now roughly a month, and technically.
You have like one more meeting
Yeah.
between now and then.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think a select board member would need to attend or should attend.
I think it's more
Right now, it's
explicit
by
than that.
default the chair.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
Do I need one of these?
Yeah.
So why don't you email me the information at the next meeting and we'll make sure David gets that. And if you put something on Front Porch Forum and you get anybody who's interested, just have them email me or Duncan and we'll get their information to the board.
Okay.
Does that sound acceptable?
Qualifications, I just want interested, I want them to have
Yeah.
interest in the beach.
I think that would,
The biggest thing coming up is we're trying to redo the road. And it's way out of our budget and but we've got grants coming, but those come with caveats too.
So, David, I'm sorry to clarify. So are people contacting Jack for information, submitting their name to Jack or submitting their name to
It's a
Jack?
good question.
so I think if they want information, Jack would be the one who has the info. But when they want to apply, they should submit to me or Duncan.
There you go.
Okay,
That sounds perfect.
Jack, what did you do?
put it where it shouldn't be.
Oh, I do that a lot. Thank you, Jack, and thank you for your service. Next, we have discussion of the transition of duties from the current town clerk to the newly elected town clerk, whomever that may be. Hi, Linda.
Hello, I'm Linda Parent and I'm your town clerk right now, and I have been for 20 years. And I'll be retiring at this town meeting. And I want some advice from what the select board wants me to do, because an elected town clerk actually is done at 7 o'clock on town meeting day.
PM.
PM,
Yeah.
yes. So if you want me to leave Camel's Hump at 7 o'clock, let me know that. And if you want me to stay on, it takes about a good 2 weeks to finish up an election, because there's a lot of stuff. You have to get everybody that won, get the oaths. Stuff goes to the courthouse, stuff goes to the Secretary of State. treasurer's office. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. I have all of those forms done. Just have to be signed by the new town clerk and by the new officers.
I would imagine that after 20 years, there are a lot of things that only Linda knows.
Yeah, and I have created quite the notebook of, okay, this is how you do the cash receipts. This is what you do when the water guys come over with their monthly paperwork. And all that's there for whoever to check out.
And of course, all the really important things, like if somebody comes in with a dog, where the dog treat jar is.
Yes, yes. And I've already been told the new person has to provide the candy like I've been doing for 20 years. So, I've had some customers that really like the good stuff. And those people, right, they just know where the good stuff is.
There, you only have top shelf candy.
Well, some of the time.
Yes,
So we have two people on the ballot. Neither one of them has any experience in a municipal office, so it'll be a learning curve for them. So I just need
So question, Linda.
information from you what to do.
One suggestion that was in our memo was to authorize a certain number of weeks, but then if the incoming town clerk says after 9 days, I think I'm good. So are you okay with it being open-ended? Or would you rather have a set?
I think it probably should be a set, to the end of March.
Bart?
So I've thought a little bit about this and informed by similar situations in other organizations. And I feel like we're walking this sort of tightrope, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, I think we don't want to intrude on the authority of the new elected
Right.
town clerk.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is gonna be up to that person. But it would seem to me that we would offer a contract, what does that person say they want? And we would make available hours of Linda's time by contract up to some maximum with a start date and an end date based on what that new town clerk wants. If that's amenable to you, then it's a little foggy right now because we don't have the direct authority or supervision of that person, right?
And we also would need to work out the rate.
Well, and it might be easier and more beneficial for Linda if we just sort of extend employment by a week or two, rather than go to contract, because that would keep her on health insurance and Beamer through the end of March.
Not until the end of March.
And then you also have some, I know there's some vacation time, so if we got to a situation where 2 weeks in, the new clerk was like, I think I'm good, you could maybe do some like vacation time with then like come in a couple hours or something to kind of like still be there, but not maybe be there every day, if that's sort of what
Now, this
happens.
new
That
person
would
might pick
be-
it right up. You never know.
But I can also see where like they think they're good, and then 3 days later they go, "Oh, Linda, I got 5 questions. Can you come in for an hour?"
Exactly.
And that, with the vacation time and leave time, that might work out.
David?
David Sunshine, I think it's fantastic that Linda is offering to help. I was in town when a town clerk lost an election and was quite disgruntled about it. And basically walked out of the office, took the keys, if I remember right.
Everything.
And the poor town clerk who took her place floundered for 6 months to the point where I had to send my paralegal down at my expense to record documents because the town was 6 months behind in recording. And I was getting calls from attorneys in Burlington wondering what's going on in Richmond. So I think it's just fantastic that Linda is offering this, and I would urge the select board to do whatever they can, because it's going to be, Linda's a great town clerk. I've seen every town clerk since early 70s in this town, and it'll be very beneficial. Hopefully they realize it to whoever takes over to be able to have a bit of her expertise.
Yeah, no question.
As they say, finish with a flourish.
And if everything goes according to plan, Adriana's planning on remaining assistant clerk if the new clerk appoints her. and she knows how to do the recordings. That's a big thing, like David said, that he had to pay to have somebody come do that. And I'm quite proud that since I've been town clerk, we have had recordings. You get it one day, you send it back the next.
The fast
And
and the fastness.
yeah, some clerks pile them up. I went to do some research at one office for a relative. And when I said, do you have any unrecorded? She says, don't get them out of order. And they were in the corner, stacked up as tall as me. Yeah, exactly. So
Oh, boy.
at that point, I gave up, but.
Cards?
So I think we're all copacetic or in agreement with this. What's the right way to proceed? Is this some kind of agreement that we reduce to writing? Because we'll have to have something, right?
So do you need a
I mean,
motion
if you
to
want to
extend
draft
Linda's?
some language.
I mean, if there's a motion to say like, at least, well, I mean, I think your point about like, if the new clerk is like, yeah, I mean, maybe like up until the end of March, and then we can work on like leave time. And maybe for a title, we call her like the past town clerk or something for a month, because like the other clerk will have the official title.
Right.
And then you could be sort of.
Well,
Town clerk
If this
consultant.
title is not mandated by law, we could make the title be whatever we want.
Yeah.
Yes.
Empress.
Clerk one.
That's taken. It's on a Subaru in the parking lot.
Consultant, you know.
Something like that, but
But
keep her on
where I'm
paper.
going, just to avoid any misunderstanding between either the new
Mhm.
clerk, Linda, or the town.
Right.
Just my bias would be to have something in writing that says what it is, what the hours or flexibility looks like, and what the payment arrangement or employment arrangement looks like, because otherwise there's nothing.
Right, and I'm kind of thinking, you know, whoever wins the election, I'm sure they have another job that they're gonna have to give notice to. You know, they may not be able to walk in Wednesday morning and work a day.
So why don't you and I work on something? We'll come back
Yeah.
with a document for the board on the 18th. But I think we've got.
Totally fine with
I
me.
think there's a general idea of what we're looking to do, and then we'll be ready.
And thank you, first of all, for your 20 years of service. Anytime I need the answer to anything, I just go see Linda. And also,
I'll call you at odd hours of the day or night.
We do have.
I know.
I want to make sure we didn't skip over June.
and thank you for not making this a cold handoff and for being available. And before you go, June?
Thank you. I was initially just going to say what Linda just said, that the two candidates will probably both of them would have to give notice because they both have jobs. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. So before you put something in writing for the next meeting, it might be a good idea to reach out to both of them, be proactive, and kind of get an idea from each of them what it would look like, so you could put a plan in place that encompasses what
Yes,
they're.
Good point, June. Thank
That's a
you.
very good point. Thank you.
The upside being there's two candidates, and presumably no write-in candidate will prevail.
I'm writing you in.
So it's not like we're talking to a cohort of 10 people,
Right.
really,
Yeah.
two, and
It's gonna
we
be
should
one
get
of
some
the two of them, I
guidelines.
would think.
Yeah.
And David, thank you for your historical perspective.
Anything else on town clerk? Okay.
Moving on.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Are we there behind schedule? When is the train coming?
Oh, I haven't checked on the train. Should be here right about now, but I haven't looked. Next, we have consideration of approval of the spring launch gravel ride. Josh, did you want to cue this up?
Actually, I will turn this over to, I think, is Amanda here? Or
John's here.
John's here. So I'll turn it over to John, as he is one of the event organizers.
Go ahead, John.
Hi, everyone. We sent you over our safety plan, and we've read over your procedures. I don't want to just read it all out to you if we don't need to. Do you have questions, or would you like me to present what we're hoping to do and go from there?
Could you give us a quick overview for the members of the town listening who have not read everything?
Sure, absolutely. So on April 12th, we're hoping to do our spring launch party and gravel ride that will start and end at the Catamount Outdoor Family Center in Williston. We are planning to have a police escort from the center down Governor Chittenden Road and out onto Route 2 and to Kenyon Road. And from there, the police escort would end. Cross through Williston, Richmond, Darksboro, and Hinesburg.
John, was it John? Sorry. I think you're getting some sort of like wind almost on your microphone. A loose connection. We lost you for a second. It sounded like a little staticky. So maybe just start over where the police escort will peel off as they turn on to Kenyon Road.
Sure. My microphone might have been in my lap there, and I was wiggling around. Sorry about that.
Sound a lot better now. Thanks.
We're the police escort will end at Kenyon Road, and then we're hoping to use mainly dirt roads through Richmond, Hinesburg, Starksboro, and then back into Williston. We have two courses. One is a 20-mile course and one is approximately a 50-mile course. This is not a race in any way, and it's a group ride. And we have every intersection has its own safety plan. We will have volunteers at any intersection that crosses roads. So if we were making a left turn, that would be where volunteers would be. In any place where we were concerned about either the navigation of a corner or any speed or extra traffic, we would have people there to help with that. The overall timing of the event is a 20-mile loop will probably be approximately 2 hours, and the 50-mile loop will be 3 to 4 hours. And we have a plan to go around after the event with a sweep vehicle to let the volunteers know that they're done, and to pick up any signage that we have, and to make sure that everybody is safely off the course. It is meant to be a fundraiser for the Outdoor Family Center, but being a first-year event, we don't anticipate making a lot of money. But we do hope to do this in the future, and if we don't start, then we don't get anywhere. I read your race procedures, and it does mention road closures and things like that. We are not asking for any road closures, and if you do want us to have a greater police presence, we're certainly open to discussing that.
Questions, comments, thoughts, Bard?
My question is, what we often ask is what the scale, how many people do you think you'll have? And if it's your first year, you probably don't know.
We don't, but we had to guess, and we have a limit. We set a limit of 250. I doubt we'll get there. We're hoping to be at about 100, 150 for this first year.
All right. And you don't have a bad weather date if for some reason. No, you do have an inclement weather date. Sorry.
We do. Yes.
6. Okay. Yeah.
It's approximately, I believe it's 2 weeks later.
Yeah. Okay.
We are aware of mud season and things like that. If if the roads are bad, we don't want to have people out there on them. And if there's inclement weather that will make it be an unsuccessful event, we would certainly consider postponing.
Do you need to stage all your riders kind of in one place to go, or they just kind of go as they come as they get there?
No, there's a defined start, and then the police escort will take them down Governor Chittenden Road safely. So there'll be a controlled start, which means that the police escort sets the speed, and then on Route 2 the same thing. The police will be there to to make sure that everybody is safe and there won't be any passing of cars for that approximately, a mile or so on Route 2. And we anticipate that everybody will be off of that within 15 minutes, 20 minutes of riding there at most.
Bard?
So this is just a detail. So for that stretch, which I can see visualize on the map in your description, is that the Williston police that are fulfilling that function?
We've asked them. They have not given us an answer yet. We may have to reach out to other towns to contract with them, but hopefully it is Williston.
Mr. Chairman, do we want to wait until they've confirmed the police? I just worry that what if you're not able to, would you still hold the event?
We'll have to, this is something that we need to do. And
like a conditional.
Yeah. I think we'd have to make this conditional on securing police presence. So, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve. Bart's got something? Bart doesn't have.
Go ahead. Okay.
I move to approve the use of Richmond roads as presented for the spring launch gravel ride, conditional on securing a police presence.
Does Bart, I'll second that.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Bard.
Maybe just during this discussion phase, David, ask if there's any concerns from John or others with that phrasing, the condition.
Is that condition of police trafficking okay with you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We don't want to run the event without it.
Perfect.
So we'll end up going to the state police if we need to get the service. So
or maybe county sheriffs would be sheriffs.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out.
They'll answer.
State police can be stretched thin. So sheriffs might be a good opportunity, like Broward said.
Any further comments? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote. This is a motion to approve the use of Richmond roads as presented for the spring gravel launch ride, conditional on police presence. Motion made by Jay and seconded by Bard. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Question, is also the condition in police.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jay, aye.
And David, aye. Motion carries. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Next, we have discussion of a complaint of an ethics violation. How did the board want to handle this?
Question being, do we want executive session or in person?
That would be the first one.
I would be inclined to do it in public, but that's just me.
I agree.
Do we think there is a reason not to do it in public as opposed to executive session? Executive session usually is where we think we are as a town are disadvantaged.
Right. I don't see it in this case, but I'm 20% of the board.
I'm 20%, I think public. Yeah, we 80% of the board seeming okay with it.
Okay. So Josh, did you want to walk us through the complaint and where we are?
Sure. So it's a complaint that goes back to the December 11th, 2024 Development Review Board meeting. And it's concerning Matt Freese, who's one of the members, and did he have a conflict of interest, noting that Matt is an abutting landowner as evidenced by his own statements and available land records. He'd been in discussion with the condo association, which was the applicant, about a boundary line adjustment. And he'd been in conversation with the condo association about purchasing a lot, which had been created through the subdivision, as evidenced by the meeting minutes, where he noted that he was in conversation about purchasing this potential lot in the future. Know that this statement is recorded in the meeting minutes, and the statement says that even though Matt Freese never spoke these words during the review, in fact, he asserted during the review that he was not involved in this application. However, the applicant stated during the review that she would talk further to Freese about the proposed project. Some of the questions being asked by the complaint is, should Parisi have recused himself due to this conflict of interest? Did Parisi fully disclose the scope of his conflict of interest? When was the full extent of Parisi's discussion of the condo association? Had Parisi been in conversation with the condo association about purchasing the lot that would be created through the subdivision? And would Parisi had been in when had Parisi been in conversation with the condo association about purchasing the lot that would be created through the subdivision? And who or whom did initiate the conversation? And what is the origin of information about Parisi being in conversation with the condo association? Noting that that was in the minutes, but according to the complaint was never stated in the meeting. I will note that I took a look at this with zoning administrator Tyler Mesha. We did find in the minutes, in the video, where Matt actually did state that he was in conversation about purchasing a lot. So the minutes, at least on my review, appear to be correct in that statement. I think some of the crux of this is what conflict of interest, if any, did Matt have? And then is this a official duty or official act of the DRB to violate the ethics policy? Does refer to official acts. Sketch plan review is not necessarily of a act of the DRB that has a vote at the end of it, although it does eventually lead to a complete application. So I think there needs to be some thought given on that part as well. Maybe I don't know if you want to go to the complaint and see if I fully captured their complaint.
Yeah, I see the complainants here. I see Matt's here, and silly question. Tyler, are you Tyler M online?
Yeah, that's me. I was just keeping an eye out. I was working downstairs while you guys were up here.
Okay,
Make sure.
you're still on.
I know, that's fine. Like,
Okay.
I just left it when I came on.
So with the board's permission, I guess it would make, to me, it would make sense to have Bradley talk to the complaint, and then we can discuss it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Bradley?
Yeah, I'm happy to share a couple of words about it, but I think the complaint speaks for itself, but I can certainly add a little bit of additional context if that's helpful.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think just to clarify one quick thing that was just commented on this, that the during the meeting in the act, if you go look at the recording, Matt talks about purchasing a boundary line adjustment. He does not say that he's going to purchase the lot that's created through the subdivision. So I think that's a really important distinction. In the minutes, it says he's interested in purchasing the lot that will be resulting from the subdivision. That's the subdivision that's being reviewed in the sketch plan. So I think that's an important factual.
So there's a distinction there between moving the boundary line and being an abutted landowner. Is that what you're saying?
No, if the DRB ultimately approves this subdivision,
right,
there'll be a new lot that is created. And what's reflected in the minutes is that Matt is interested in purchasing that lot that will be created as a result.
Okay. Okay.
Versus what he actually said in the meeting was that he's interested in purchasing a boundary line adjustment.
Okay.
So I'm not sure which is factually accurate or both, and it's curious why the minutes say one thing versus the other. So that's but like I said, I don't want to go into all of it because I think that the complaint largely speaks for itself. I guess the big thing for me is this is clearly a official act of the DRB, even though no decision is ultimately held. This is, a sketch plan review is an act that is codified in the town subdivision regulations. So it's a little bit shocking to me that nobody at the DRB, during the meeting had any concern with this. There was opportunity for everyone to chime in on this and say that there was, if they had a question or concern about it. And it certainly seems to me like it's clearly an official act, something that this is spelled out as part of their official duties as a DRB. And certainly there are other things that could mitigate this, but I could go through that if it's helpful, but none of those other mitigating circumstances apply in this context. So it's a pretty clear conflict, and a bit surprising that the decision was made not to recuse. But again, I leave it to the select board to decide what you think is appropriate to do here.
Okay, thank you, Bradley. I think Bard was first.
Well, so yeah, and I'm pondering this, and to be fair, other people such as you, Bradley, probably read this and are more conversant in the moment than I am. But reviewing this again, Article 3 suggests that it starts with disclosure, the behavior of the person, right? Article 4 suggests that there's a consideration of recusal. including other public officers shall be afforded an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. So are you referring to that sort of process, that it wasn't stated and considered? Or are you referring to what you consider a failure for Matt to just absent and recuse himself?
I think both are in question, but I would say the primary question is, I mean, clearly at a minimum, he's a budding landowner. That's a pretty clear direct conflict of interest, and he has an interest in the business deal with the applicant. So I mean, that is clearly not in question, and that's a clear direct conflict. Beyond that, there's certainly there are questions to be raised about if the extent of the conflict was fully disclosed or not. Beyond that, but even if it was fully disclosed, then even the conflict as disclosed should have I would argue should have recused for that reason.
What is, Bradley, what is the conflict? What is the value of the conflict? What's the possible outcomes of the conflict, whether it's resolved or not resolved? Can you help me with that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. How do you mean?
I'm not sure I understand my question either, but the conflict, okay, it's conflict. It's the conflict is either had or not had, but what would be the outcome of the conflict if it were resolved in someone's favor, and if not resolved in someone's favor, either side?
I think you're asking how would
what's the point of
benefit from the conflict? Is that what you're getting at? I'm not sure.
Well, help me out. I mean, I think you know more about this than I do, but there's a conflict. Somebody wants it resolved in their way or the other way. What are those?
Well, I think in this case, it's pretty simple. He has a conflict of interest. He should recuse himself. There's other board members who can hear the issue. That avoids any conflict or perception of a conflict of interest by recusing. There's enough other board members to hear the matter. So,
Matt, did you want to speak before I called on Tyler?
Yes. Hold on a second here. So, first off, I was not part of the application at all. I didn't even know about the application from the condo association. So that's one thing. I had no idea about it. I think if we brought the members of the condo association in here, obviously these are all participatory actions, that they would agree that I had no part in their application that they submitted. So I think that is incredibly important if we're going to get into this much further, whether we have to require them to show up or submit a written statement, subpoena them, whatever. I am a developer, obviously, a small-time developer. I talk to lots and lots of people about land. I just talked to Gary Bresser about buying some land. So the fact of the matter is I do speak to a lot of people about purchasing land because that is what I do for a living. These discussions, how far they go, sometimes it's sometimes it's just a verbal discussion, and sometimes it leads to more. At this point, with the condo association, it's been a verbal discussion, mostly talking in person or over the phone. So as far as that, I disclosed to Tyler earlier in the day, actually earlier in the week. I said, hey, we've had informal discussions about, maybe me doing a boundary line adjustment. And he said, essentially that this was a sketch plan review and it had no binding action. So he didn't see any reason for me to, recuse myself. So again, there wasn't any kind of trying to be dishonest again. But that's the position we find ourselves in, whether, I'm at fault because it's, what I do. I'm incredibly knowledgeable about our land use regulations, which I think comes in incredibly handy being a member of the DRB. it seems to me, unfortunately, that Bradley has continued pretty much at every single DRB meeting to, how do I say this? He poses a conflict of interest or has some issue, and he basically has a written statement before every DRB meeting or post every DRB meeting regarding someone's application, especially if that member is on the DRB. David just had a application, and he had an issue with that as well. So while I understand his issue regarding this, as he sees it as an ethics violation, I think it's pretty clear if we brought all the players into this that they would see that I did not violate any ethics policy by having discussions with people. I mean, if anything, a lot of this is hearsay. Unfortunately, I don't know what you guys want me to say in that regard.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I do think I can shed a lot of light on this, and I think
can I say something first, please? I think it's
Hang on.
important. I just want to say,
hang on. I'll get to you.
Going into this, we have to look at the definitions on both the code of ethics and so what constitutes an official act, a quasi-judicial proceeding, and a conflict of interest. So, Article 1, prohibited conduct. A signatory shall not participate in any official act or action if he or she has a conflict of interest. That in turn leads you to what is an official action? That means any legislative, which rules the DRB, which that doesn't apply to the DRB, administrative, which would be me, or quasi-judicial, which is the DRB. This term does not apply to ministerial acts or actions where no discretionary judgment is exercised. That then takes you to what makes something a quasi-judicial proceedings as defined in the Code of Ethics. One of the key characteristics of that, it says it has to result in a written decision that is appealable to a party of higher authority. In that case, it would be the environmental court. That and then in turn takes you to the definition of sketch plan review, which is noted in Article 2, Section 200 of the Richmond subdivision regulations. And I also provided this memo to Josh earlier. I wasn't sure how many of you members got a chance to see it. But it does note in the very definition of sketch plan review is a voluntary, informal process and is not binding on the DRB or the subdivider. It's advisory only and is not appealable to environmental court. Therefore, since it's not appealable to environmental court, no discretionary judgment is made. It is not a quasi-judicial proceeding. Therefore, it does not meet the definition of an official act. Therefore, Matt has not violated Article 1, Section A because no official act has been taken. Therefore, you do not have a conflict of interest because there is no decision that's being made. Had this been preliminary subdivision review, where the board does have an actual authority to approve or deny an application, Matt absolutely should recuse himself from that. But given that this is non-binding, it's an informal discussion, there's no direct conflict of interest.
Bradley, go ahead.
I just like to say that I think it's completely inappropriate for Matt to make such an accusation that he just made against me. That I show up to every meeting, that I make comments on everything that is completely untrue. I have commented on a few items where there is something that is particularly of note, or when I just think that's wholly inappropriate for a town official to make an accusation as he just did. So that's all I want to say. Okay. I think in terms of that's what I was going to say a minute ago. In terms of Tyler's comments, I think there is an ethics commission that you can ask an opinion of. You can get an advisory opinion from them. I think in terms of interpreting these sorts of things, again, at the end of the day, it's your judgment to decide. But I will note that there are people who can give you a unbiased opinion on these topics. So,
okay, thank you, Bradley. Just going to go to David, then come back to you.
Well, actually, I'm a select board member. I haven't spoken yet.
Go ahead.
Okay, can I share?
Yes.
Okay. I want to point something out that members of the select board who've heard me talk about this issue probably can practically start parroting me word for word regarding how ethics policies work. The document I'm sharing is a summary published by the Vermont State Ethics Commission of the new Vermont Municipal Code of Ethics, which supersedes our town policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it begins by listing which people are even covered by this policy. It discusses core provisions. And I'd like to just sort of summary of sections. This obviously is a summary of more detailed logic. Recusal and disclosure, blah, blah, blah. No directing others to act unethically. No participation after recusal. And the one I wanted to bring us to is one that people seem to be having a lot of trouble with in this town.
The appearance of.
The appearance of. This is not a casual item. I feel very strongly about this. We need, anybody who has a public trust needs to avoid even the appearance of ethical impropriety. That is not just pleasant words. It's not just a banality. It's important. Now, I can't point a finger at Matt or anybody else in the DRB and say, here's where you clearly crossed a line on any of these other provisions, but I would like to get it through to people, not just in the DRB, but every town body, that if you have to ask yourself, could someone look at this and say, maybe you shouldn't be doing it? And if somebody says, oh, I don't think that's very important, people will always see conflicts. Then you need to be asking yourself, what is it that you're doing that causes people to see conflicts in everything you do? So maybe this is not, it may or may not rise to the level of conflict in this case, but I'm frankly getting a little tired of having to remind people that you need, if there's even a question of a conflict, you need to err on the side of not conflicting, full stop.
All right, then, David.
Just to add a comment, that there is a connection from what you're sharing here and the full language in Article 1A, which fully reads, a signatory shall not participate in any official act or action. And there's a question about that. If he or she has a conflict of interest, whether real or perceived. So perceived and appearance, I think, are similar in the matter under consideration. So, the appearance and the perception are, I think, similar areas of concern. It's not just real where you can document it or prove it. It's also the appearance or perception.
I agree.
David, go ahead.
So, that hearing that the complaint raised took place in December. In December, we were under the Richmond Rules of Ethics. That particular ethical consideration came into force on January 1. So we need to look at what took place. Let me finish.
I am.
We need to look at what took place in December, and maybe that's changed come January, but we're looking at December. There's also a great misconception in this town with sketch plan. Sketch plan is an informal, non-official device for the DRB to meet with the proposed applicant and have a general discussion. We don't warn that hearing. We don't send notes out. It's often confused. We had one hearing where 26 neighbors jumped on the DRB over the sketch plan. We had no idea what was being proposed because we had nothing in front of us. The sketch plan is simply a discussion. It is not an official hearing. I don't disagree with the comments about appearance of impropriety, but in this matter, all we're trying to do with sketch plans is flesh out what's important to the applicant so that when they do come back to us with an application, which is usually prepared by an engineer at some expense, and they pay a fee for it, we will be prepared and they will be prepared. So I don't believe that anything took place here that was inappropriate. We had a general discussion. Now, maybe under the new general rules of ethics that the state has promulgated, we have to take a closer look at it because of the impropriety question. But in this matter, I don't believe that Matt acted improperly, and I don't believe that there was a violation of ethics there.
Mr. Chairman, this dates back to the era of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar divorced his wife. This is actually a real thing because he could not be seen as having even the appearance of impropriety regarding an affair that she'd been involved in. This is not a new concept. Yes, this official state policy may have gone into effect on January 1, but it has never been a good idea to take official governmental actions where a reasonable person could stroke their chin and go, I'm not so sure about this. And my question for you is, could that sketch plan review have proceeded entirely without Mr. Parisi's involvement? Was he integral to that discussion? Or could he have just simply said, it's better to err on the side of caution and not taken part?
I have no idea what that thinks.
So he was, but are you saying he was essential or not? If he was not essential, he should have opted out.
Maybe he should have, maybe he shouldn't have, but it's not, you use the word official, and that's a misnomer here. It was not.
No, okay, stipulated it was not an official discussion. However,
He could have easily recused himself.
and in
sat
hindsight,
the audience.
I'm asking you with your experience of many years as chair, in hindsight, do you think it would have been better if he'd recused himself?
I think for a sketch plan, it doesn't matter, but under the new ethics that you have on the board that you shared with us, I agree that using the words of appearance of impropriety, which is not in our ethics, he would have to, but this took place in December.
Mr. Chair.
There was no, in other words, I'm not just completely disagreeing with you, but the complaint goes to a meeting in December. And that's what we need to focus on. Did Matt do something improper in December? And I don't believe he did.
And I do think it is important to point out, and again, the appearance of impropriety can be almost as bad as impropriety in and of itself. However, there is a flip side to that, is where what is the purpose of ethics, right? Is it really to try and make sure that the public's trust is respected and that the people process is conducted accordingly? Or is it to be weaponized and kind of say, got you to say, oh, you didn't say this exact phrase the right way? Because we have to be able to have some realistic standard. If we're going to hold somebody to something, say, what are we holding them to? Therefore, we have to be very clear when we define things that we are going to hold people accountable. We should spell out exactly what those actions are. Per our code of ethics at the time, it very clearly defines what constitutes an official act. In order for there to be a conflict of interest, it has to occur in the context of an official act as laid out in Article 1, Section A. Given that the definition of sketch plan is very clear that this is not an official act and is not a quasi-judicial proceedings, because it does not meet the definition of that, I find it very difficult to see how somebody could reasonably be construed to have a conflict of interest if they don't meet the actual definition of what somebody who would have a conflict of interest.
Can I say something? I haven't for a while. That's exactly why I want to know what information was being exchanged, what was the ultimate purpose, because until people know what you're discussing, the ethics don't even apply, I don't think.
And that's
until you're trying to approach a decision.
And that gets to your point. That's what a sketch plan is. Right. It's that conversation.
That's the very first.
There's no lot line, there's no decision that's made. The board could say, we would like to see this. An applicant could come in with a completely different application. They could decide not to come forward with an application. They could take the board's comments into consideration. Again, it says very clearly in there, it's non-binding on the applicant. It's non-binding on the DRB.
Because it's a starting point. And it hasn't gone.
Exactly. There is no actual decisions that are being made.
And Lisa, to answer your question that you asked of Bradley, what would be the effect of this? I don't think there is any great effect because the applicant hasn't brought an application to us yet. This is just a general discussion.
Bart?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm finding it personally really challenging in our current political environment to be talking about ethics. And I think I actually give credit to us for having a conversation about ethics in a pretty fine-tuned way. that does not appear to be happening at all at the federal level at this point. I think there are lapses of not only ethics, but frankly, sane judgment at the moment. But putting that aside and reframing to a coherent view of ethics, I'm coming back to, there's this broad principle where I think in general, we should all try to avoid even the appearance of ethics as the.
We want to maintain the appearance of ethics.
Of conflict of interest. But when I come back to the full definition, what was then contemporaneous, the official act or action definition means any legislative, administrative, or quasi-judicial act performed by any public officer while acting on behalf of the town of Richmond. This term does not apply to ministerial acts or actions wherein no discretionary judgment is exercised. So that's your point, I think, Tyler, that second sentence that, and you as well, David, perhaps, that
Yes.
in the review of the sketch plan, there is no discretionary judgment exercised, and thus it was not an official act or action under the code of ethics then in force. That's the substance of the perception. And it seems rational to me. I think there still is, like, moving forward, since we're not in December, we're now in February. I think we should all be conscious of conflict of interest. And I really go to Article 3 and 4, which really are disclosing something, like put it out there. If you think like there's some possible conflict, you just cop to it, or if there's any even appearance, to put it out in the public meeting is probably the prudent thing to do.
To your point, Bard, that's what Matt did. I bake into every decision as a result of the last time we went through this. I now have built in every single agenda item as a disclosure, and David's been doing it, a disclosure of, does anybody have a conflict of interest or any evidence of ex parte communication? We had that conversation at the meeting. Matt disclosed it. The board discussed it. The applicant didn't have any issue with what was going on. There wasn't any other members of the public there who raised any concerns with it. And I understand, especially in these fraught times that we're in, of having the ethics, but this gets to my point, is that having vague statements like the appearance of accountability or impropriety, that sounds great. It makes you feel good. You pat yourself on the back. But when you go to define it or hold somebody accountable to it, you're grabbing smoke. You don't have anything. If we want to hold people accountable, we need to clearly articulate to them, what are we expecting them to be held accountable to? Much the same way as if you got pulled over by a police officer for saying like, oh, you were, for some arbitrary reason, and he can't say what specific action did I do to elicit this. I think most people would have a very hard time of justifying that particular action. And again, I think there's a broader conversation to your point, is that maybe we could look at, there's always ways you can improve things. But my argument is, if we're going to hold people accountable, said you did this, we have to be able to define what that is and say why you didn't do it. And I think in this case, at least to me, it's pretty clear that none of the boxes are checked. There's no official act. There's no ethics violation.
David?
Please do not forget, we're a small town. And the board is a lay board. And, if we come down to an application in front of us, that in front of the DRB, and the question is, do you know the applicant? Have you dealt with the applicant? It's almost impossible not to know the people that come in front of us. We are a small town. And I disagree greatly with Bradley's comment that being in a butter automatically makes you unavailable to hear that hearing. You can easily be in a butter of somebody, and you could be hundreds of acres away and it not even affect your land. So I think just being in a butter doesn't automatically put you in a conflict situation.
Chelsea has.
Brendan, your hand was up. I see it's down. Did you still want to speak?
No, I think my hand's still up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in briefly.
Oh, your hand's the same color as your wall. That's why I couldn't see it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not super close to this issue, but I do just want to emphasize that number one, I think ethics are super important at the national level. It's an atrocity right now, but when we zoom out to the Vermont level and we look at what's going on, like we have a huge challenge in front of us in terms of housing and development and putting up unnecessarily high barriers for developers at this time feels like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We, to that last point, we are a very small town. You know, the people that are helping out are doing so because they care about the development of our town. And this, I think, is, you know, something that we should be considering in this. We have not been able to articulate a clear ethics violation, in my opinion, in this space.
Thank you, and I apologize for not seeing your hand. I'm going to go to Chelsea and then to Bradley. Chelsea, go ahead.
Chelsea, you're muted.
Hi,
There
sorry.
you go.
Yeah, it takes a minute to unmute and figure that all out. Oh, lower hand also. There we go. Now it's not on my forehead. I just wanted to come on here and speak to some of these things because I feel like Bradley is being vilified for raising this concern when I believe that it is completely legitimate. I too hold the same concern over ethics and sort of the DRB's handling of recusal, especially recently. I think that it's important to point out that Mr. Parisi tried to sort of state like there's a pattern, there's a history of Bradley pointing these things out. But I'd also, in that same tone, like to point out to the select board that this situation happened right on the tail end of sort of the DRB, I guess, for lack of a more eloquent way to put it, being called out on an ethics situation right before this. And so it's sort of like feels a little bit like a slap in the face. Like, we don't think we did the wrong thing then, and we're going to just do whatever we want now. I think that this explanation from Tyler and David about this not being an official act is kind of a cop-out. Like the DRB hearing a sketch plan review is with the purpose to make that individual, right? So why would anybody come in front of the DRB for a sketch plan review? It's because they want to increase the chances of higher success when they come in front of the DRB for their preliminary hearing, right? Nobody's doing this because it's a fun time to hang out with the DRB. Granted, I'm sure they're a great bunch of guys, great bunch of people. Like, it's because this is the way to do the process and have the highest success rate. And in this hearing, when I watched it back myself, I didn't view it live, but when I watched it back myself, it was alarming, really. His sort of the extent of the disclosure that there was a conflict of interest, or there was a potential conflict of interest, right? Like, was Mr. Parisi saying that he was an adjoining property owner and he'd had discussions with the condo association about a boundary line adjustment and possibly purchasing land. He then didn't go on to state, I believe that I can act in an unbiased way. David Sunshine sort of then cuts him off in the meeting and says, that's fine, because we're not making any official decisions here, so that's fine. You okay with that? He asks the condo association if they're okay with it, which of course they're going to be okay with it because they've clearly had ex parte communications with Mr. Parisi about him being interested in purchasing this land as a developer. I'm not saying it's wrong that he talked to them about purchasing the land. Like, that's his business. That's what he does. And could his role as a developer be beneficial to the DRB? Absolutely. It could like give him different insight than other members. However, in this situation, he clearly has sort of a interest that is beyond that of being a DRB member, an interest that is going to benefit him financially. And the fact that he did not recuse himself is, like I said, alarming. But furthermore, the fact that the other members of the DRB thought that this was like sort of just appropriate and that it was fine is concerning, especially given some of the discourse at the end of recent meetings where they sort of talk about how they're giving the members of the town too much leeway and like letting them talk too much, and that maybe they should tell them to shut up some more. Like, if you watch back some of the recent DRB meetings, there's some concerning things being said when they think they're not being recorded. And so that on top of this, I think that there should be a little bit more thought given to this. I have no idea what the solution is or the plan or the decision, but I just wanted to come on here and speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Bradley, go ahead. Then I'll get to you, Lisa.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this short because I don't think going back and forth on this will be productive. So, but I'll keep my comments very brief. I just want to echo that Chelsea just touched on a few of these things, but this is clearly an official act. I mean, it's outlined in the subdivision regulations. Official act is the word in the municipal code of ethics that existed in December. I don't know how anyone can argue it's not an official act. It's literally part of the duties of this board to hear these sketch plan reviews. And the effect is that it does influence the future direction of the review. It has significant influence on where the application goes, it's a dialogue between the board, between the applicant, and it influences the future, the direction of that application going forward. So it absolutely does have an influence. My goal, I just want to be really clear here. My goal is, this is not some gotcha. So I've been accused of lots of things tonight. My goal is not to have to have some like, oh, gotcha on this thing. It's like, I want you to have and understand, and I want town officials to have a single standard that everyone understands and follows. Like that's what I want. And it seems to be a lot of confusion about what that standard is and should be. So I would strongly suggest that, this issue has been debated quite a lot tonight. Like, is a sketch plan review an official act or not? I don't understand why there's so much debate about it, but if there is so much debate about this, I would suggest that you do seek an advisory opinion from the Ethics Commission on this. And again, that's for going forward. That's not for what happened in December, because that was not under the state municipal code of ethics. But going forward, this is an issue that clearly is going to come up over and over again. If you all think it's okay, I would really strongly suggest you get an advisory opinion from the Ethics Commission, because I strongly suspect it's not okay. So that's all.
Thank you, Bradley. Lisa, Bard, Jay.
Yeah. Bradley, that's a good point, actually. We should be able to get that opinion from the Ethics Commission. What would they need to see? Would they need to see the tape? Would they need to see a transcript?
You can just outline the concept to them. I don't think they need to see everything. You just need to explain to them, is this an official act? Would this be something that should be considered as an action? Or I think that's essentially the question.
I would like to know, seeing the weeds that we've just walked through also. I think that would be more useful in my mind as an answer from the Ethics Commission, to know that they walk the same path we've been walking here for the last 10 minutes or so. But
yeah, so to be clear, I'm not asking you to have the Ethics Commission adjudicate this issue. I'm saying the specific complaint. I'm saying the larger question of what the standard should be on this sort of thing. That's what I'm asking.
Good point, though. I don't want to lose that. We've got an actual example in front of us that we've been discussing and having certain trouble with it. I would like to know how that looks to the Ethics Commission, that exact discussion. For me, that would be informative because we've been there already. The next one will be a little different. The next one will be a little different. So I'd like to get as much value out of this as we can, whichever, however it turns out. And second of all, was there a decision made by the DRB on this?
To that point, there is no decision. And again, I think
past this,
what you have to, again, this is what I do on a daily basis, is I read definitions. That's what the town pays me to do. And if you read, again, Article 2, Section 200, it very clearly states that sketch plan, and it's in the bottom paragraph, it says sketch plan review determinations by the DRB are advisory only, and as such are not appealable to the environmental court which then takes you to the definition of quasi-judicial proceeding as defined in the Code of Ethics in effect at the time of this meeting, which clearly notes in the end that in order for this to be a quasi-judicial proceedings, you have to have something which results in a written decision, which sketch plans don't, the results of which is appealable by a party to a higher authority. There is no appeal because, as was clearly defined in the sketch plan, it is a voluntary process. Therefore, it doesn't qualify as an official act as it is defined. How things are defined, and I think if we want to look at, the broader problem that we have in this country, there's difference between norms and rules, right? If you want something, how you define things and what you write down matters quite a bit, right? And I think it's quite clear if we're going to accuse somebody of a breach of ethics, and we very clearly, I think, have a definition that says that that person doesn't even meet what the person did, doesn't even rise to the definition as the town defines it of a breach of ethics. It's very hard, I think, to want to try and hold somebody accountable when it very clearly, per things that we have written and defined and quite clearly don't meet the definition for.
I appreciate your illustration or whatever. Appealable to higher authority. That sounds like
environmental
will start to apply at some point. And
yeah,
good, because at that point, I think it's a lot.
So, because that's how the process works. So let's say I make a decision, right? Somebody doesn't like my decision. They appeal it to Development Review Board. Somebody doesn't like the Development Review Board's position. That gets appealed to Environmental Court. Somebody doesn't like Environmental Court, goes up to State Supreme Court. That might change with the new land use board that they're putting together. Just once in a while. But yeah, that's what it is designed to do. There is no thing to appeal.
Last thing I want to say, Bradley, thank you for paying attention and keeping us on our toes, because it takes an engaged citizen to really make this work.
And we, to be fair to Bradley and Chelsea, we did take those comments into consideration over the recusal issue last time, which is why I built into the agenda very explicitly that does a special section where the board discloses, does anybody on the board have a conflict of interest or ex parte communication? It's on the agenda that's posted right now, was on the last two agendas, at least from December on. So it's now a part of every agenda that I put out.
Bart? Last statement, please. We'll never be perfect, but we can get closer. So,
Bart? So a suggestion about, and maybe you do this, and I missed it, a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest is, I think, how it should be phrased, just because that's what the current January ethics was, as I understand it. Says. I think there's two questions, and I'm not particularly confident in the question to the state ethics people about what our ethics policy meant in December. So I think we actually have two questions. What did our ethics policy in December mean in this situation? And I think that's what you've really tried to focus on, Tyler and David, your comments as well. And that's where I go to these definitions. What was the law or regulation or policy in effect at the time? And you can't hold people accountable to a statute that didn't exist at the time. You can only hold them accountable to the statute, policy, and regulation that was in effect at the time. So I think it seems to me that the question about December might be a question for our attorney. What does act or official act or action mean? Is participating in a conversation that has no decision an official act or action or not, based on how we defined it in December? I think there's another question to the state ethics folks about current state. What would it mean today? And it seems to me plausible they'd be two different answers.
Or three.
Because they'd be two different legal frameworks.
Yeah.
Hang on, Jay.
Okay. I want to speak to the larger issue. I grant you that what happened in December may not have risen to the level of a technical ethics violation, but I want to remind people of something, and I want everybody to listen really clearly to this. Across the state, for decades, people have been using the "we're a small town, we're a small town, we're a small town. Things are done differently here." I cannot tell you how many blatant embezzlements were allowed to take place because of the whole, we're a small town, things are done differently here. This town of Isle La Motte, where the town treasurer was the daughter of the select board chair and the niece of the town auditor. And people who objected to that select board meetings in the town of Isle La Motte were told, we're a small town, we do things differently here. After the bank accounts had been looted, then people said, oh, maybe we shouldn't have allowed that. Now, I'm not saying that this rises to the level of blatant embezzlement from town coffers. I'm saying that I don't ever want to have somebody come before me and say, we're a small town, we do things differently here. Ethics violations are ethics violations. And who cares what the law was or the codified rules were before January 1st? The rules now are, we avoid the appearance of ethics violations. And don't you come tell me that that is not equally important to every other bit of the policy. If you have to worry that some third party will look at that and say, that smells slimy, then you shouldn't be doing it. It smacks of Bill Clinton going, that depends on what your definition of is. If you're getting the impression I'm ticked off here, I am. I can't do anything about what happened before January 1, but things are going to be different now.
Chelsea?
You're muted, Chelsea.
Oh, now?
There you go.
Now you got it.
You're good.
Thank you. Jay, I really appreciate sort of your comments tonight and very much agree with you. It's unfortunate that I feel like from at least the perception of the DRB is that like people are out to get them. And I can see where that's coming from, right? Like they're serving on a town board and in their opinion, like doing a public service, and to be sort of called out can feel really overwhelming or like an attack or like a personal attack. And I don't think that hopefully they will feel that way in time. But to go along with what you're saying, Jay, like if you see something, say something, right? Like the way that those situations in the small town that you're talking about, the way that they proceed and people get away with them is because somebody who sees something doesn't say something because they live in a small town and they're afraid of the outcomes of what will happen if they speak up, right? There's sort of that perception from both sides. And I just, before I presume this will be the last time I speak to this tonight, wanted to point out another definition because they seem to be popular this evening, in that ethics violations have to do with an official act. And the fact that there's no decision made on a sketch plan review, no other board, no other acting body in Richmond can review a sketch plan. The select board isn't doing that. It's an official act of the DRB to see a sketch plan review. And then furthermore, in the Richmond Development Review Board's rules of procedure in section 7, it states that public hearings shall be conducted as quasi-judicial proceedings and then pursuant to a state statute it cites. So essentially the fact that this was heard at a public hearing, the public hearing itself is a quasi-judicial proceeding. So as Bradley was saying, I don't know how this could be misconstrued as not an official act of the DRB. But I guess we'll see if you consult with the lawyers or whomever else the ethics committee regarding that situation.
Well, and again, a quasi-judicial proceeding has to have a decision at the end of it in order to tick that box into being quasi-judicial. That's why it's in the definition. You can't appeal a sketch plan.
No, you can't appeal a sketch plan because an official appeal.
And I think we agreed to ask for.
We're losing sight of the original
and ethics, state ethics folks to give us an answer to that. Because I think we debate both sides of this issue for a long time.
And I did read the new code of ethics as well. And I had some concerns with it, how it was written, because again, to your point, I guess I would say that sword cuts both ways. I think you can also have, and I'm not accusing anybody of this, you can have individuals who take that process and rather than be interested in a legitimate, inner workings of government decide that I'm going to weaponize the process and go after people, because again, it's real or perceived, right? So if I just say, Jay, or any member of this board, you have a conflict of interest, per the new standard, now you have to submit in writing why you don't have a conflict of interest. And then it has to be recorded for a period of 5 years. So if you get a group of 5 or 6 people in here accusing every member of this board of an ethics violation, now you're sitting there spending God knows how much staff time writing responses, dealing with things that could be considered frivolous.
Tyler, I'm disappointed as I'll get out in what you're saying. I'm disappointed in you as a town employee for saying what you just said.
Sure.
An ethics policy, you can come up with all kinds of absurd scenarios that weaken the whole idea of an ethics policy.
No, we should have very strong ethics policy. That's what I'm
Yes.
for, defining clearly what it says.
Once you start saying, how do we strictly define appearance of an ethics policy, of an ethics violation, then you're weakening it. If you have to say it doesn't rise to this, and this, then you suddenly are giving people the ability to say, well, because of subclause 3A, this is not a perceived ethics violation. Err on the side of recusing yourself. Full stop. I don't care what body we're talking about. And I think we've probably, since we've got some action items on this to talk to the State Ethics Commission and attorneys, and we therefore can't make a decision on this tonight, and before I get any more annoyed, I think maybe we should move on, but that's just my 2 cents.
Matt's got his hand up then.
Yeah, I think I'd like to simplify this a little bit too. Do you all give advice on the select board? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, this meeting was there was no binding things being issued at this meeting. And the Development Review Board was giving advice to the applicant. Okay. So, and I wasn't even on this application. I had nothing to do with this application. They never even told me about this application. I think I find it difficult because if you're giving advice, and I was giving advice or telling them how to proceed with hiring an engineer, then that's something we really need to look into, because all board members then in some essence, right, could have some kind of conflict of interest. And I think it gets really loose really quickly. And this is a volunteer position, unpaid, obviously. So I just think it's unfortunate, given the circumstances that took place that night, that we see this as an ethics violation as opposed to actually trying to help the applicant, which is what we're, as town officials or town members, supposed to do.
I'm gonna add one last thing from I'm not saying other can't have one last thing, but I'd like to reframe this whole discussion. I think a lot of us agreed the rules were technically, there's that word again, different in December. But I think we need to use this as an object lesson going forward, because going forward, we now know the rules have changed. And the rules make it very clear, if there's any question whatsoever, err on the side of caution. And that's something we can all learn from, not just the DRB, not just the 3 Parks Committee, not just Select Board, everybody who serves the town in some capacity.
So I agree. I think that makes sense. I think we should table this until we get greater guidance on the
couple points,
words. And I know people sometimes think, oh, we're just like, that's legalese or whatever, but I think to the principle of our policies that the language, the sentences actually matter. They either mean something or they don't mean something. So I think that's what we should return to when we come back to this issue, specific to this complaint of an ethics violation. And then I think to your second point, I think we need a different, broader conversation about the current state ethics policy obligations, and a much stronger, I think, as you've suggested, a much stronger focus on appearance of potential conflict as opposed to actual. And I also say that if I understand correctly, maybe to some credit, is that Article 3 and 4 about disclosing and consideration of recusal did actually happen, which I think is to some credit, even if it's very partial credit.
And to your point, it's gonna be at the next DRB meeting. We are having a discussion about DRB rules and procedures, updating that. Part of that is actually working in some of that language, Jay, and I'm sorry if I came across as and if I don't care about ethics, I do. And part of that, how I approach it, my framework, and that's largely informed by my job, is how you define things matter. That's all I deal with all day. And I understand you're never gonna get a perfect definition. You're always gonna be judgment calls, and you're right. You should, if there's a question, err on the side of caution and do that. And I would think that's very sound advice. And it's something as a public official, I'm very careful about. My father's a contractor. People ask me for advice on builders things. I never disclose anything of that because of that connection, even though my father hasn't done work in Chittenden County in 20 years. But to your point, I think it's just that what I just want to have is make sure if we're going to have somebody accountable that said you did this, even if it's imperfect, you should be able to sit there and say, based on X, Y, and Z, you have clearly demonstrated. Because I think really at the end of the day, that's what we care about. It's the very blatant, like Matt or somebody, or I got a check to approve an application under the table for somebody. That's really what we care about.
If you do, you have to declare that on your tax. If you do that.
Yeah. Or call it a tip. Or call it a tip. But no, but that's the point, right? That's what we really care about, right?
I think that's one we would all perceive as being
that's a pretty
unethical.
cut and dry one. Obviously, there's stuff around the edges. There's stuff that are more mercurial, like we talked about tonight. That's tough.
Yeah, we just don't need any more Isle Lamottes, and
no, and
nothing that's been brought up tonight rise to that level. But we just that whole we're a small town, we do it differently here. Ethics are ethics.
Drip, 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 drip.
Yeah,
we don't want to go down that. So Bradley, thank you for bringing this complaint forward. These conversations need to happen. They're not always pleasant, but they are usually productive. We will table this for tonight, but certainly get back to this. I do want to thank everybody for speaking and speaking freely. And again, as Tyler just alluded to, the definitions are important. If you ask 5 different people what their perception is, you will get 5 different answers. So I appreciate the intent behind the policy, but things like perceived conflicts, I think we need to dive a little deeper and get some sort of an understandable definition of what perceived conflicts are. Any final comments before we move on, Lisa?
Chairman, I guess just to follow through on this, if we get, I'd like to see us get an answer from the State Ethics Commission. What do they think? I mean, they're important.
They'll probably be pleased to hear from us.
Maybe, yeah.
Showing people are thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they will have some enlightenment that everyone getting, by the way. Maybe not. It'd be nice to know. So let's, I don't know how we do that, but I guess we can plan, John. But our attorney should be able to take that.
Yeah.
It's fairly straightforward. Just
Well, I'll go to the Ethics Commission first and see what they say. I think that's probably,
yeah.
I mean, they're the body that's supposed to do that. So let's see what their
See what their perception is.
That interprets the current ethics law. So I mean, that's why, in my opinion, this is really 2 distinct questions.
I'll ask them both questions and see if they can help us with, they might say, we can't help you with yours, but they might, and if that's the case, I'll go to our attorney and see, but we'll try to figure it out.
So I'll just say, adhering to the United States Constitution looked one way in 1840, and in my opinion, a different way in 2025.
There is that. Okay.
very incisive.
Moving on, Josh, do you want to give us an update on the Emergency Watershed Protection Program funds?
Yeah, so on Friday, January 24th, 2025, we received an email from the state director of the funds to say that there is a moratorium on new obligations for Emergency Watershed Protection Program funds. And just as a reminder, these are grants that come from essentially the federal government through the state, through the town, to then benefit. And in our case, we have 8 private property sites that would benefit from these funds by mitigating potential future flooding damage on those sites. So we sent a reply out to all the property owners, or just message out to let everybody know that this is gonna be what's happening as far as the moratorium. Right now, they don't have any reasons for why the moratorium was put in place, and they don't understand, they don't know why, well, so they don't know why or when the moratorium might be lifted. And this was actually, so this was, I know you're all thinking of last Tuesday's freeze on funding. This was on the Friday before that Tuesday, so the timing is a little bit.
I was thinking more of something that happened on January 20th.
Well, but the timing is just, I'm just noting the timing is 3 days before the president put the freeze on funding, and which was then subsequently reversed, I think 2 or 3 days later. There's a stay on that. So I'm not really sure. I mean, it's probably related, I'm sure, to the new administration in some respect, but the contact that I have at the state wasn't able to provide any more information. Even he couldn't even tell me which secretary. I asked, well, which, he just said the secretary has put a moratorium on it.
Which secretary?
And
We
I
don't
said, well,
know.
which secretary? And he said, none of the notifications I've received include which secretary, but assume it was a current acting secretary of agriculture, which is where the program is funded. So unfortunately, I bet this is a little bit of a sign of the times right now. And we'll stay tuned to see if they lift this and can approve these 8 sites.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing for the homeowners. One thing to mention is we do have 2 sites that are currently already awarded, and we're moving forward with engineering to get to construction. Those sites are unaffected as far as funding. The only way they could be affected is if there's a cost overrun and that had to be approved, then that may be affected by a moratorium if it's still in place at that time.
Disappointing, but not unexpected.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Josh.
There you go.
Follow up on the Southview Stormwater Notice of Intent and review of soil investigation.
Yeah, so I've got a few things. We'll start with the notice of intent. So we discussed this at the last meeting. We noted that we had received an incomplete notice of intent, so I did a little follow-up. I wasn't able to get in touch with Terry Purcell, who is Terry was the person who was here back in September. We had the conversation. I think he's more the director of the program, but I was able to get in touch with the person who wrote the the incomplete status notice of intent. So it sounds like there's sort of two things here. One is that the engineering is not complete, and apparently it was not going to be complete when we initially put the notice of intent in. There's still months more of work to be done by the engineers. So the notice of intent is not completely done until all the engineering is done, and they put in basically the idea of what the plan is, what the engineering plan is for that going forward. There's the 60-day deadline, but the contact I have, Megan, noted and replied to me in writing that is frequently and usually extended. It's pretty much routine. We have Title III protection, which means we have a current permit. We've got the notice of intent at least partially in. They'll continue to extend that because they know that from the engineering side, we're going to need a lot more time to complete this. So it's sort of a procedural thing. The second part of that is that they noted we don't have the homeowners on the permit. That's one where I haven't been able to get an answer from Terry yet. So as soon as I just haven't been able to connect with them.
Seems like that's an integral part.
I agree. Our engineer tried to set up a meeting for early last week. We never heard back. I called him again at the end of the week, never heard back. So we're continuing to try to get a better answer from the state on what they expect, given the situation that they are very well aware that we're in right now. I also asked about the addition of noting on the notice of intent reply that this is separating it out from Hidden Pines and Mary Drive. And Megan noted that was their way of putting that in writing, that this is going to be separate from Mary Drive and Hidden Pines, which I think is a good explanation and allows us to see them. They said that it's going to be separate. Now we have that in writing. So I'll pause on the notice of intent, and then we can talk maybe about next steps, and then we can talk about soils.
David, just a question. So separate, what does separate mean? Does that suggest that there are other stormwater permits they will pursue?
For Southview and Hidden Drive, Hidden Pines.
Yes.
No, sorry, it's for,
Mary
Project. Yes, so they will have their own permits and the board already approved moving forward with engineering to address those, but the engineering on that was, I think, about $4,000 per site to move forward with, and then each year after that, it's like less than $1,000 to renew that permit and do the inspections and the engineering. And those are less than 3-acre sites, so they're a lot less, they're a lot less expensive, yes. And we had combined them, but they're not part of the 3 acres, so that's where the state is now separating them out.
It's frustrating, the whole thing is a fishing trip of safety in
Yeah.
the first place.
Well, we've been down that road and talked about that a lot, and now we're trying to deal with the operational aspects of it.
The other thing that I know we're talking about the notice of intent or NOI and the soils investigation. Do we want to mention also that Senator Chittenden's bill and VLCT, that those are swirling around in
Sure.
higher levels? So Senator Chittenden put forth a bill that purports to address some of these things for kind of the orphan projects such as this. And when I looked at it earlier today, it had been assigned to committee, but hadn't had any hearings or anything yet. So who knows what action happens on that this year, if anything.
Right, because it would help if you were on the committee.
Well, yeah. And then the other piece was what VLCT intends to do in their last legislative update. Certainly stormwater didn't get prominent, was not a prominent feature. So I don't know what to make of that. And I have not heard back from them. I posed the question, was this still on the radar? And they said, oh yeah, you should read the legislative report. But that is not the same thing as, are you pulling in people for testimony or legislative advocacy? So that still is kind of a question mark in my mind.
Yeah, and the last response I had was what I updated the board with, that they said, okay, thanks, we'll kind of put you on the list and be in touch with next steps, and still haven't heard. I'll put a note to follow up with them too, to see if there's any more that we can get.
Do they plan any actual action? Like, by which I mean asking to give testimony to a committee? Or that's really what action you can get out of the legislature at this point. And presumably it might be centered on either Senator Chittenden's bill or a request to revisit modifications to a previous bill.
So the next steps here, they're continuing to do some completion. The engineers are completing what they call their desktop map. They'll probably come to the February 18th, or if they're not ready by then, the March 3rd select board meeting to discuss that in more detail with the board and review it with the board and the public. Then they'll be proceeding to some field work where they'll actually go around to the entire site, see the roads, see each house, sort of site house by house, to review existing conditions. You know, how is stormwater running off of each individual house and driveway? They do need to wait until the snow is melted for that. So that'll be coming in the springtime. And we'll make sure that we notify homeowners before they go out and do that.
So they're going to be doing a house by house soil check?
No, not soil check, just observing additional conditions of like where stormwater is going off. So if you have a rain barrel or a rain garden, they want to kind of note that in their study. No, so I'll get to the soils in a minute. So then they're expecting that this scope of work should be completed by sometime this spring. And as I was talking with Andres a bit more today, just to make sure I was clear on everything. So there's unfortunately will be a potential, there's going to be a little bit more engineering fees than we have in the initial contract that we need to get to the official notice of intent. The way he described it is, this scope that we have with them right now is for the $30,000 of engineering to kind of get 30% design so that they can say, okay, here's your preferred alternative. And then based on what that is, there'll be some final engineering to get that to be able to submit the notice of intent. If it's a simple solution, it won't be a lot more engineering. If it ends up being more complex, it could be more, but they don't really know that till they do this first piece. And in order to get the grant funding for this, for the $30,000 and the $20,000 that goes towards permit fees, we have to complete that last portion. So I was under the impression when we went through all this in the fall that this was all going to be fully funded. But there's going to be a part right now that is not funded, and we'll know more about that in a few months. We'll know more about that.
A bunch of assumptions have to be made for them to proceed, and then later those assumptions will be tested. And then
Yeah, and I think that's why they couldn't give us a price on like what the final cost is gonna be of engineering, like you're saying, until they get their study back. So that's a little bit of bad news for tonight, unfortunately. The soil testing, they were able to test in 3 spots. And their key takeaways were that of the 3 borings they did, they found really good deep sand in 2 boring locations around Westall Drive and Westall Extension, and signs of higher groundwater and much wetter soil at Jonah Ave near the intersection or near the stream. And then based on that soil, different stormwater practices could be put in place.
Right.
But overall, it sounds like, and even talking with Andres today, he's very happy with the soil testing that they've done and what they're
Well, that's
seeing.
something.
So that seems to be hopefully a little bit of good news perhaps in this.
So there's no runoff, so we don't need to engineer anything.
I don't think it's quite that good news, David, unfortunately.
You really don't.
And I'm gonna ask one other really dumb question. Bart has made the point on multiple occasions that at the end of the day, the water goes through a couple culverts. Did they address the question of why can't we just like make that the point of emphasis? Catch the water there?
Yeah, I did ask them that question and they said that they sort of need to do like the study to see like where all the water is going. And that typically V-Trans usually pushes back on like, oh, let's just put it right there. But they said they're gonna, if that seems to be, in their opinion, the best spot, they would keep that open. And I said we would be very interested in keeping that open. But a lot of it's gonna depend on the science. Where's the best spot to mitigate this, I think.
Well, it just seems like, and I'm not a soil engineer or a water engineer.
But if it all goes through that pipe.
All goes through that pipe,
Right. Well, that would probably be a better question because I don't want to speak for the engineers because I'm clearly not an engineer. But when they're here on the 13th or the 3rd, let's ask them some of those questions. And I think they'll be able to reply better than I can.
Sure, there's a question.
Oh, I've had a couple email exchanges with Andres and his team about that would be a preferred method of the select board. But as I recall, his response was it kind of, if the science and the engineering leads them in that direction, then they'll do it. But usually there's some other things upstream that they can implement as well. So again, a much better question for Andres.
So I don't prefer it just because I prefer it. I prefer it because I'm actually looking at where the water goes.
Well,
I applaud the idea of let's use science as opposed to the artificial construct or arbitrary construct of which permits at which point in time give us authority to make who do what, where, and who pays for it. I'd like to approach it with the science, like what is the most cost-effective way of reducing silt and phosphorus infiltration into the river?
Right, I think that's what EPA is.
Right. Well, I'm also interested in protecting the water, but not at the expense of soaking the people who live in a particular arbitrary district their life savings, which is the direction that at times it seems like it's going to go.
And
With
what I've
marginal
heard,
impact.
Widespread, so.
Exactly.
Widespread.
and what I've heard that V-Trans, because they don't want to pay for it or maintain it, and I totally get it. And this feels a lot like the water line extension into the gateway. Like everybody thinks somebody should pay for something, and everybody thinks somebody else should pay for it. So I'm really after the science and what's the best evidence for a cost-effective solution.
Paige, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I just want to make a comment about, there's been a lot in the news the past few weeks, in particular by the governor and his address about this clean heat standard. And they want to repeal it because they don't feel it's right to make Vermonters pay for all this stuff. I just want to say that it's very ironic to me. If you haven't read about it, I'd encourage you to, because it just, to me, is an eerily similar thing that you're trying to meet certain environmental guidelines for clean heat, and it's going to raise the prices of heating fuels by a lot. And they don't want to do that to Vermonters, but they're okay with doing this to some Vermonters.
Good point. Thank you. Update on the DRB approval of the Browns Court site plan review.
So the DRB approved the site plan for Bruns Court, which included the pickleball courts, parking area, and a few other recreational installations. The main obligation of the town, as per the DRB, is that we have to maintain the trees that we'll plant around the pickleball court, which I think was gonna be our plan
Cedar, yeah.
anyway. So right now, we've got a bid that we're ready to move forward with for the pickleball courts. We'll just need to pull some permits, because the decision doesn't give you your permits, but I think we're moving forward with the pickleball courts, which is good news.
Bart?
Were there, and I'm not saying this just with humor, it's a serious question. Were there any adjoining landowners, members of the DRB who participated in this discussion?
Not that I'm aware of.
Fair enough.
No.
I just think it was an example of where things come home, like, is that a conflict of interest? I don't know, but it's an example. If you were a neighbor, you might be for or against it.
Paige, is your hand up still, or is your hand up still? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I always forget.
No worries. I just wanted to call on you if you had more to say. Update on funding from the FEMA claim on the January 2024 windstorm.
So just included in the packet, the signed agreement with FEMA, along with total reimbursement for the storm, which came to $8,500. We'll receive an additional 17.5 from the state, which will come to about $1,900, and administrative cost reimbursement of about $570. So one of our smaller storms, but that one is wrapping up here, which is nice to see. Total cost for about 11 or 12,000, but at least we're putting one to bed.
Thanks, Josh. Any questions on the Richmond Rescue fiscal year 25 second quarter report? Bard?
The one comment I'd make, and first to state the obvious, Richmond Rescue presents both in terms of, one's observation and the data as a well-run, functional, private nonprofit organization. But I was struck by, this is a potential agenda item for the future as we contemplate our appropriations for other private nonprofit organizations. One of the things we might contemplate is asking for similar kind of data. Now that we given you money, can you tell us what you accomplished with the money we gave you from the other organizations?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a future agenda item, and I think the way it could play out is in next year's cycle of funding requests to modify the form. And maybe ask people to submit data like mid-year and end of year, like what did our money accomplish? And then the subsequent year, you could either perhaps you'd be informed by, or the voters would be informed by what data people did or did not give us. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I think it's entirely reasonable.
It's good. It gives them a chance to run their flag up in the flagpole.
Because of, it's been said before, if I put together a random charity and just ask for money, will you guys just give us money? There needs to be some purpose, and the more numbers we've got supporting that purpose is good.
Yeah.
And just more accountability. And kudos to Richmond Rescue for being accountable in terms of their performance.
And I will just add, we routinely almost flatter them, although they deserve every word we say. But talking to members of other town governments across the state, they would kill to have the rescue squad that we've got. I think we've got the finest rescue squad in the state by a long shot.
And we don't have to manage it.
Right. I tell people, if you're going to have, fatal injury, horrible injuries or accidents, this is the town to have them in.
They're all going to come here.
Some sort of tourism slogan.
Yeah. If you're gonna,
Sounds like a Bolton Valley thing.
Oh, let's hope not Bolton that way. Oh, boy.
So next is consideration of approving project completion forms for the Vermont Bond Bank. Now, the Jericho Road project, that was what, 2011?
Yeah, both of these have been completed for, I think, over a decade, or in the fire truck's case, 2 decades. but the bond bank is asking us to complete project completion forms, which Connie says we've never had to do in the past, and now they're like, hey, we need you to do these, and we're like, okay, those projects have been completed for a while and we're paying for them, so. Brought them to the
They get
board.
These from, can they show us an example?
Oh, no, we have the form, we just need
Oh,
to sign it, yeah, no, it's a very simple, like, yes, we bought the fire truck, and yes, we completed the project.
The fire truck's been scrapped.
Um,
They didn't ask.
right, it's, yeah, because usually you do these types of proof of completion, like.
The frame cracked and rusted out, the tank leaked and the engine blew.
But they've asked us to do it.
But we got spinning rims.
So,
Yeah,
so I think it's a fairly simple form to send back, they're both done, so if you want to.
so just need a motion.
Both, and then I got the form from the warrants.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the certificates of project completion for the Jericho Road Infrastructure Bond and the 2005 fire truck.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Bard, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bard. Any further discussion?
My only point of value, they'll be even happier to say completion of payment will be a better day.
Yeah. Okay, calling for a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
I will say one thing, your note about completion date of payment. It was good to hear in the audit that they're seeing our debt go down, and I just thought about all the work we've done in the capital plan. To pay ahead for things and
Yeah.
to save in advance, so it's good to see that. I'm just happy to see that noted.
So that's taken care of.
Roger will be happy.
Yeah, I think about the Roger Brown legacy often.
Roger would be even happier to see the interest income.
Yes.
Yeah, he would be.
Next is consideration of holding the second select board meeting in February on Tuesday, February 18th, due to the holiday on Monday, February 17th.
David, this is Bard, I'd like to move to hold the second select board meeting in February on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025, due to the holiday on Monday, February 17th, 2025.
Jay, second.
Thank you, Bard. Thank you, Jay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, aye. Motion carries. Purchase orders.
You want to do minutes,
Yeah, I'll do minutes first.
to make sure we get it.
So I'll call for a motion to approve the draft minutes of the January 21st meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept and approve the minutes as written for January 21st.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second?
This is Bard, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bard. Anybody have any corrections to offer to those draft minutes? Hearing none, absent any further discussion, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, aye. Motion carries. Okay, on to purchase orders. So first is the fire protection purchase order 4916, in an amount not to exceed $50,681.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve purchase order 594916, in the amount of $50,081. $681, excuse me.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second?
This is Bard, I'll second it.
Thank you, Bard. So for those who might not know, this is to cover the portion of the new water tank, which was solely installed for fire protection. So the water and sewer, 400 water and sewer users don't have to pay for the fire protection for the 4,100 residents of Richmond. That portion of the tank is borne by the taxpayers as it's fire protection for the whole town.
And there's also a portion of the water budget that this pays for too. So even when that bond is paid off, there'll still be an amount because the fire department does use water for training and for fires.
Yeah. Calling for a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Bard, aye.
This, Jay, aye.
And David, aye. Motion carries. Next is purchase order 4974 to Simple Route for IT services for a total of $23,001. Noting that the Water Resources Department is responsible for a portion of this purchase order. So we're just approving the town portion. Water Resources will approve.
Yeah, and this is actually just an amendment. The prices went up by 5% on January 1st. So it was originally approved for $22,440, and now it's up to $23,001. here's a breakdown of the monthly bills. So the town pays $1,600 per month. Water and wastewater pays $346. So it's mostly admin because we have more users and more to protect. So yeah, this is, and since this was originally approved by the board, I had to come back for the additional
5%. Yeah.
So moved. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
4974.
The amount of $23,001.
Thank you, Bard. Do we have a
That's
second?
$1 that's the correct one.
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you, Jay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling for a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Bard, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, I. Motion carries. Warrants. Anybody have any question on the warrants?
I do think it bears mention the whole, I mean, I understand about Bennington Sheriff Solar, but I don't know that everybody in town knows what those are.
Give a quick overview?
Yeah, if you would.
Yeah, so the town has bought into a solar array, and so that ends up offsetting our power costs. So the best way to think about it is if the array produces $10 worth of power and Richmond consumes $100 worth of power, the power bill for Richmond is reduced by $10 and we pay $90 to Green Mountain Power. But then we pay $8 to Bennington Sheriff for the solar array. So we've in effect paid $98 for $100 worth of power. That's because it's solar, so you get some credit for that. So you don't get a full 10% reduction, but you get about a 2% reduction. The way they bill is the power bill for Green Mountain Power is reduced in real time. So as the credits go in, that gets reduced. But then the town pays Green Mountain, or the town pays for the solar array with a fixed monthly cost over the whole year. So as we get to the end of the year, they look back and say, well, right now we have to true up with them. I think it's about $6,000, or I don't know how much emissions, but it's a couple $1,000. But basically what happened was our power bill was reduced by more than we paid into the monthly payments. So now we have to true up and pay a little bit more for that. But in the end, we're still getting that cost savings. It's just you pay for it at the end of the year rather than in real time to the solar array. And it's a way for the town to support green energy and get some savings.
That's what we did with ours, except we just went ahead and paid it. And then the rest is just electricity flow, power in.
Yeah, like a net metering. Yeah, and
it takes the financial part out of it, but then the interest rate and all that stuff, which made it a lot simpler.
Yeah, and I think what's unique about this one, it might be a little different, is we paid to be part of that system, whereas that's I assume that's on your house or on your property.
Yeah.
So it's direct and you're the only customer of it. But because we sort of paid in on this, that's where you get that money where we pay two entities for the power, but ultimately get some savings and get greener energy.
Yeah, it's a good, either way, it's a good thing to do.
So, but yeah, that one always, the end of the year true up, I always have to kind of wrap my head back around. Why do we owe more money? Because they produce more power? Oh yeah, because we saved more money over the season. So yeah.
It's new math.
Just kind of no clouds ever. Easy.
Yeah.
The snow outdoors. Actually, the power goes.
So
you actually, solar panels are actually more efficient in the cold.
Yes.
Yeah. If you just don't have any snow, but yeah.
Sunny.
There's just no sun.
Yeah, but I mean,
There's more efficient,
even on
but they
cloudy
don't
days,
work.
my panels are making electricity.
That's great.
Just have to have no snow on them.
Yeah.
I'm so steeply pitched, the snow doesn't stay there very long.
That's good.
So can we have a motion to approve the warrants?
So moved.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bard, I'll second it.
Thank you, Bard. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Bard, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, I. Warrants are approved. Items for next agenda. Ethics.
It's no hurry, but at some point, perhaps contemplate modification to the charitable appropriations request form.
Yeah.
For data.
I agree. That's a good thing. Good thought.
Jay, your hands look amazing.
Oh, good Lord.
Smile.
Very modern art looking with the balloons in the hands.
99
Those are thoughts.
balloons.
Is it 99 red balloons? That's really Tells me it's a little less than 99.
I was actually, I was sitting here counting.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I trust you. All right.
Goes with the song, 99 recommended.
So are we ready to jump into our executive sessions?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Chairman, I move to find that premature public knowledge about an unfair labor practice charge would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
It's Bart, I'll second.
Thank you, Bard. Calling the motion to a vote.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Say aye.
David, aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter into executive session to discuss an unfair labor practice charge under the provisions of 1 VSA 313A 1E of the Vermont statutes and to invite town manager Josh Arneson into the executive session.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, aye. We are in executive session. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move to find that premature public knowledge about police department hiring would cause the town or the person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Jay.
Bart, I'll second it.
Thank you, Bard. Calling for a vote.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter into executive session to discuss police department hiring under the provisions of 1 VSA 313A3 of the Vermont statutes and to invite town manager Josh Arneson into the executive session.
Thank you, Jay.
Bart, I'll second it.
Calling for a vote.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Jay. For a second.
Yes, Bart, up here.
All in favor of adjournment, please sit up by yourself.
Aye.
For your vote.
Jay, aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.